illusion. So at the end of the day, there is no way to definitively know. But I know for sure, so we'll talk about it. Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host of the Toast, Rytos, here to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's like we always do. I don't think we have any housekeeping today. I think we're just good to go. So today's episode, I wanted to open with something that I'd been kicking around for a while. It was a question that was brought up a while ago that was just kind of in the back of my mind. And we answered it on the podcast, but it's just been a bit. And I just wanted to, I guess, talk about the implications of it a little bit more. And that's the idea of, did Edwin Murray invent illusion discs? So, which is a crazy thing to just say, but let's break down the logic and then look if there's any evidence in it, right? So the logic behind it being essentially, there was a question on this podcast about a month or so ago about if Edwin Murray did survive. One of my issues with him surviving was, how is he avoiding M1 and M2, right? Like throughout the entire game, we're being watched by M1 to the point where, like, when we go after Big Top, there's that moment when we leave the building, and when we get back, Dispatch, or M1, is talking to us like, hey, I lost communication with you there for a second. I was worried about you. Which, you know, implies that if that's the only time that's ever brought up, M1 knows where we are the entire time. Like, if we're in the building, M1 knows where we are. To the point where, like, when you're in the tunnels in the parachute ending, M1 keeps closing doors directly in front of us. Which is saying, like, even in these, like, weird backroomsy tunnels, M1 knows where we are. So, M1 is able to track people within the building. Yet, at the end of the underground pizzeria section, M1 talks to us like, hey, Edwin is in the house. I just need you to go ask him to fix M2, please. So if M1 thinks Edwin is in the house, then clearly, if Edwin isn't, M1 isn't able to track Edwin. So we then have to answer why, right? Like, if M1 is so capable and able to track us and every little movement we make, why is it that she still thinks Edwin is in the house? I think moving forward for ease. Sorry, I'm so distracted by, like, just everything. I'm ADHDing the fuck out of this right now. I think for ease, instead of M1, I'm going to say Fiona, F10, M4. Because, you know, M1, M2 is a mouthful and a little confusing. So I'll say Fiona and M2. Now, if you believe Edwin Murray is dead, this isn't a huge deal, right? Like, frankly, this is one of the best pieces of evidence for Edwin Murray being dead. The idea that, you know, M1 would know if Edwin's alive. M1 is able to track us the entire time. The idea that Edwin Murray, this old man at this point, is able to just wander throughout the hallways fine. I mean, he's not an old man at this point. He's like late 20s. He's an old man by the time of security breach, but that's a whole other issue. But the idea that Edwin Murray, this bumbling guy, is able to just evade M1's tracking and M2's hunting, right? Like, we're not in the building for more than an hour before M2 finds us and begins hunting us down. So the idea that Edwin Murray is able to avoid M2, which does want to kill him, by evidence of that one audio log, and Fiona's tracking, is crazy. So if you assume Edwin Murray is dead, there's no issue here. And I still think that's good evidence for Edwin Murray being dead. But then, you know, we get moments where Edwin Murray seems alive. The main one being that update, which added the shadow that is passing back and forth in that window in the warehouse. If that's Edwin Murray, we need to answer how he's survived this long, how he has avoided M1's seeing of him, and how he has, I mean, essentially evaded M2 as well. So then the question becomes illusion discs. And this is the question that I got to the email a while ago. And we didn't really talk that much about it, which I think was a mistake on my part. I think this is ripe for conversation. The idea that if Edwin Murray is alive and he's been somehow evading essentially his own security system and attack dog, is that because he has some sort of rudimentary illusion disk, something that hides him from the robotic presences at the factory? And logically that makes sense. So, and that just the idea of him having it. So if we look at in the books what an illusion disk is, essentially it is something that can make a robot look like something else. It can't fully change something, the bounds of what it's capable of are somewhat arbitrary and not delved into, but it seems like there needs to be a similar-ish body for this illusion disk to change what you're seeing. In the Twisted Ones, there's these big FNAF, bare bones, barely painted animatronics that the illusion discs make look real and fleshy and disgusting. In the fourth closet, the fourth Charlie bot looks like a skinny circus baby, essentially, but is using an illusion disc to either look like a large circus baby or more like Charlotte Emily. I think it's that way. It's either that way or it's circus baby regular is looking like, at this point, I don't remember which one's the original. It's not that important. Regardless, the illusion disc is making her look like all these different things. And in the books, there's also this piercing noise that it makes that makes people nauseous. It takes you a while to get used to it. One of the characters, the first time he hears it, throws up. It's this really grating, high-pitched noise. And that's what they're meant for. But as the story goes on, our main character, Charlotte Emily, reverse engineers one of them to make you invisible to the robots, essentially. If you put it on and you activate it, instead of, making something look different to a human, it emits a frequency that makes you invisible to the robots. And this is something Charlotte had been working on separately. She has this project where she has two talking robot heads and just has them talk to each other to see what happens. And she made a headset where they'll only pay attention to you if you turn it on. So with that technology and the illusion disc, combining all that, she's able to make this technology where it's essentially an earpiece you turn on and the robots can't see you anymore. That's interesting. Now, that's the only time, as far as I'm aware, directly that an illusion disc is ever mentioned. But we have evidence of them cropping up in other places. One of them being Help Wanted, the book. So one of the Tales in the Pizzaplex stories shows Steve Snodgrass being hired by Freddy Fazbear's Entertainment to create the in-universe FNAF games. 1 through 3 is what he gets, and then he gets partway through 4. And basically they ruin his life and then make him live these horrible nightmares in order for him to make better games, essentially. But it's never really directly stated how they're doing this. But we know that throughout the story, he keeps hearing this really grating frequency. And at some point, he destroys his fire alarm is maybe the cause of it. The radio is maybe the cause of it. And throughout the whole time, he's having these horrible nightmares. He thinks his wife and children are there, but it's these mannequins. So it's very it's very hallucinogenic based. And, you could argue what is the cause of this? Because this is the same series that brings us Didophobia, which gives us a hallucinogenic gas that does something very similar. And, maybe the noise he's hearing is the vents of the gas. Or there's the idea that if it's an illusion disc situation, then the noise he's hearing is the illusion disc, and that's what's making these things look more real, and giving him these horrible nightmares. It's hard to say either way. But that's one instance. And then there's there's two big moments in the games where people say illusion discs crop up. One of them is in Sister Location, the little circle we take off of Funtime Freddy. So if anyone were to have an illusion disc, the Sister Location animatronics makes the most sense. After all, That's where in the fourth closet they are really fully introduced. The twisted ones have them, but there's not a really good one-to-one for the twisted ones in the games. Whereas like the fourth closet just straight up is the Funtime animatronics, and they use these illusion discs, so that makes sense. So the idea that we're taking this, because it was one of those things that never really made sense, where it's like, oh, you need to take out Freddy's power core, and it's this little black disc that like is stuck onto his endoskeleton. So one of the thinking is maybe that's an illusion disc. But the one that I think the thing most people agree has the most evidence, whether or not you believe it's true, is that Vanny is utilizing an illusion disc. The idea that, throughout the game, none of the animatronics can see Vanny. Freddy himself can't see her, and we get that confirmed immediately. That's one of the first things we learn about Vanny, is that Freddy cannot see her until he gets Roxy's upgraded eyes. So until then, he cannot see Vanessa, which is weird. Well, he can see Vanessa. He can't see Vanny, which is weird. Immediately, that's like illusion disc, illusion disc, illusion disc. But then there's two other bits of evidence that help us out here. One, in one of the therapy logs, she mentions there's like this is either a therapy log or one of the emails. I don't remember exactly where, but there's this mention that Vanny is fuzzy on the cameras. There's like, oh, I saw you talking to this fuzzy rabbit character, and no one's really sure what it was or whatever. Is that glitch trap showing up in the cameras? I don't know. Probably not. If it's supposed to be Vanny, the illusion discs also make you not appear on camera. And that's something that's established in the fourth closet. Whenever they try to take a picture of the fourth Charlie bot, it's like weirdly blurry and pixelated and doesn't look right. And that's the illusion disc happening. Which completely negates the whole like logic of the illusion disc, because like in the books, the whole reason they work is they send a high-pitched frequency that scrambles your brain. But like cameras don't have a brain anyway. Anyway, that's another link there. And then the biggest, I think, swing is on top of all of this, what happens when Gregory sees and gets close to Vanny. There's that high-pitched ringing, and he gets this like distorted vision, which, some people use that for evidence that he's a robot. I personally use it as evidence of this is a stylistic choice to show the effects that ringing is having on Gregory. That like, the first time, I think, God, is the character's name John? The first time one of the characters interacts with that noise, he throws up. It's so like awful to hear. So the idea of like, that's like a visualization of like a migraine essentially immediately happening to you. I think that's really logical. So I think for all intents and purposes, Vanny is using an illusion disc. I think that makes perfect sense. I think that's our strongest piece of evidence for one of these existing. So now our question is, where did they come from? Who invented them? Up until now, it's been like, probably William Afton. So now we have to talk about Edwin Murray. Now, is there any direct evidence of an illusion disc existing in Secret of the Mimic? As far as I know, no, not even a little bit. So the question then becomes, can we logic our way there? And I think the answer is, yeah, kinda. So, like the question initially mentioned, if Edwin Murray is avoiding Fiona and M2, an illusion disc is a perfectly likely culprit for how he's able to do it. A piece of technology that makes him invisible to robots. That would be a done and done easy solution to get him there. But is there any other ways we can link Edwin Murray to an illusion disc? I think there are. After all, if security breach is a maybe, or sister location is a maybe on if there is one, but think about the two instances in this entire game we have like clear possibilities for illusion discs: sister location and security breach. Two locations that are both directly linked to Secret of the Mimic, because it seems incredibly likely, if not directly canon, that the underground bunker underneath the Secret of the Mimic Edwin Murray mansion is converted into the sister location testing chambers. It just makes perfect sense. And it's basically like guaranteed that the lot of Murray's Costume Manor is eventually the lot of the Pizzaplex, because like the underground pizzeria is in the same location, the parking lot and like mountain range is the same location. Everything lines up for it to be there. It just makes perfect sense. It's why the mimic's still there. It's why all this is still there. And if so, we know that Vanny is working in the underground pizzeria to help like whatever Burn Trap and Glitch Trap's deal is. If she's down there and utilizing the technology that's there, that's another possibility for her to get her hands on an illusion disc from Edwin Murray. So there's two direct links of the only two times we have any inkling of an illusion disc existing being directly linked to Secret of the Mimic. So again, this evidence keeps piling on that, like, evidence is not a great word for this. But I need a word that's a noun like evidence, but for speculations. You know, and I'm sure there is one, but I'm having a brain fart because that's what we have in FNAF. We very rarely have direct evidence in Five Nights at Freddy's. We more often have like really good speculations. I guess I'll say correlations for now. That's now 3 correlations for Edwin Murray, and that's not the best word, but it's the only one I can think of, for Edwin Murray being associated with these illusion discs. So is that just true? Did Edwin Murray invent them? I don't know. I think it's still possible that, yeah, you know, William Afton or Henry Emily could have invented them because, you know, at this time he was working with the two of them. So it could be something like, oh, hey, I came up with this. It might be helpful in your workshop. So we don't know who invented them. But the idea that Edwin Murray was utilizing them to avoid Fiona and M2 is, I think, the best, like, most logical way that he survives those encounters. Because, like, how the fuck else is he going to survive that? It's Edwin Murray. He's not like some mastermind. He's Edwin Murray. Like, he's kind of an idiot. So the idea that he's just deftly avoiding Fiona and M2 this whole time, I don't think is logical. So if he's in the mansion, which we have evidence for, he would need to be avoiding a master surveillance system and a expert tracking robot. And if we have 2 instances of illusion disc possibilities, both pointing to this game as an origin, it lines up. It's one of those like pre-theories. It's a theory on evidence that maybe we'll get down the line. Because like whatever this next FNAF game is, if it goes into any of the Secret of the Mimic connections, the illusion disc I think is prime there to be explored. So if that is true, then I think we are prime for evidence linking Edwin Murray to an illusion disc. And if we get any evidence linking Edwin Murray to an illusion disc, I think all of this lines up. And I think that's excellent evidence for the sister location animatronics using them and for Vanny using them. Frankly, at this point, I'm convinced Vanny already uses them. And the fact that she's like utilizing a lot of this technology from the pizzeria, the underground pizzeria, I think is good evidence already for that. So I feel really strong about this. I'll probably make a full channel video delving a little bit more into it. But yeah, no, I think Edwin Murray inventing the illusion discs, or at least utilizing them around the times of Secret of the Mimic, makes perfect sense. And I think there's a lot of good correlations and connections you can make because of that. So, you know, again, this is a question we kind of touched on a month or so ago. But I think this deserves a second look through. But yeah. Let's move on to questions for this episode. So if you have questions you want answered on the podcast, feel free to send them into Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. That's in the description because it's a pain to type out. Our first question comes from Chris, they, them. So even as a longtime FNAF fan, only now have I ever really wondered why people considered Michael to stay as a corpse. It doesn't really make sense that he stays a walking corpse after Sister Location, because that's just not how bodies work. Don't say it's Remnant, because Remnant was already infused into him when Ennard decided to enter his body, and even then he still rotted. My question is, do you think he healed over time, or did he really just stay as a walking corpse? If so, why didn't the Remnant keep his body from rotting much earlier? Is he just rotting slowly? Really love to know your thoughts on this. Thank you for your question, Chris. So immediately, before we go into any of my speculation about this, unfortunately, we don't know. Just like straight up, unfortunately, there's no way for us to know for sure what Michael Afton's deal is. Hell, we've never even seen him outside of an 8-bit pixel art sprite. And it's not really 8-bit, but we've never seen him outside of a pixel art sprite, let alone we've never seen him after Ennard leaves his body. So we do not know and we cannot know. We can only speculate. And the worst part about that is we can only speculate using what we know about Remnant, which 90% of what we know about Remnant is speculation. So at the end of the day, there is no way to definitively know. But I know for sure, so we'll talk about it. So, but again, that's me being cocky. I think it's a matter of how you interpret how Remnant works and how much leniency you're willing to give to Remnant and to believability. So we do know for a fact that Remnant has some sort of healing properties. We don't know exactly what they are, but we know they can heal. I can think of at least 3 separate instances where it's directly shown to heal. One of them and it's from different iterations, right? Like 2 of them are from Fazbear Frights, where actually, no, it's from each book series. This is a repeated theme because in Fazbear Frights, we see the Stitch Wraith using his remnant to heal Detective Larson after he got wounded in the first fight with like the agony. But then, we see it again in Tales from the Pizzaplex. So the very first story is a girl working at a hospital who has a remnant necklace that she essentially like scrapes little bits of remnant off onto hospital patients and they miraculously get better. Like whatever was wrong with them, it's fixed. It's like remnant seems to be this like miracle drug. And then we look at the Silver Eyes, that series where in the 4th closet, William Afton's like, well, let's see what this does, and injects remnant directly into Carlton's heart. Now, remnant is molten metal. So if this was normal molten metal, Carlton would be dead like instantly and painfully. But he passes out. He enters this like spiritual realm where he gets to see the missing child incident kids. And then once he helps them recover their memories, there's this moment where the main one kind of looks at him and goes, no, you'll need this. You'll die without it. Give it back to us when you see us again. And he hands him the page that they've been collecting. And he gives it to him and he wakes up and he's alive. Remnant is very closely tied to memory a lot. So the idea that, they were collecting the memories in this realm and then he gives him all the memories as they leave, to me, it seems pretty like 1-to-1 that they were collecting enough remnant to have the kids remember what's going on. And then a majority of that remnant was given to him so he could survive. Remnant is at least a powerful enough healer to heal a heart injected with molten metal. So we know Remnant's powerful, and we know Remnant is a powerful healing factor. So, going to the games, we have Michael Afton, who rots away and then survives. And he does go through a Remnant injector. Now, to your point, you say, don't say it's Remnant, because Remnant was already infused into him when Ennard decided to enter his body, and even then he still rotted. I think it's a logic thing. So Michael Afton is put through the scooper and Ennard wears his body until it's like not feasible anymore. They escape to the sewers. Michael gets up. He's still alive. What's happening? So I think what makes the most sense, and this is all speculation, so I wouldn't take any of this I would take all of this with a grain of salt. I would not take this as the direct truth. I think what makes the most sense is that Michael Afton is actively suffering while Ennard is inside of him. So, and I think this is done on purpose. By the time of Sister Location, spring locks are a thing. Like, we know about spring locks. And the whole point of a spring lock suit is that the endoskeleton is inside that suit. It never leaves that suit. It's connected to the suit. But the endoskeleton is pushed to the side to allow a human body to fit in. So all the endoskeleton parts are separated and pushed to the sides of the walls of the exoskeleton. And then a human person can fit inside. I think Scott Cawthon very, very deliberately made Michael Afton the inverse of that, where it's a human body whose insides are being pushed to the side to make room for a robot to enter. It's a fucked, horrible thing. And if Remnant is real, in this universe, and if Remnant is keeping him alive, Michael Afton was alive for all of that. And I can't imagine how excruciatingly painful that is. But I think what's happening is while Ennard is inside of him, all of his body parts are being crushed and pushed to the sides, and they cannot properly function. Remnant can heal you. It can't fix what's actively going on. So I think while Ennard is inside of Michael, his blood cannot flow, his organs cannot function, he begins to rot away. And once he's rotted enough that Ennard needs to leave, suddenly, now, he is a human person with all of his body parts filled with remnant. I don't know how long it takes, but I think the logic here is that the remnant begins to heal him immediately, and he kind of shambles off and takes time to heal, since he's been injected with all this remnant. I guess is my best words for you. So the question is, like, if that's what happens, what becomes of Michael? I think logically you can go either way. We've never seen remnant heal somebody from that bad of a state before, so we don't know what would happen. If you want to believe that over time he is fully healed, it's possible. We don't know. If you want to believe that the remnant is able to fix his body but not undo the rot that's happened, I mean, that's possible. We don't know. And I think a lot of the time people err on the side of the walking corpse theory and the fact that he looks like that because it's cool. And that's kind of the only reason there, and that's fine. It's one of those things where we don't really have a good answer for it, and it doesn't really change that much. Especially like my timeline, I think the only game that happens between Sister Location and 6 is FNAF 3. And the idea of Phone Dude vetting his employees does not cross my mind. If walking corpse Michael with face mask, hat, sunglasses walks up to Phone Dude and says, "I want a job here," Phone Dude's gonna be like, "Yeah, hell yeah, dude. Fuck yeah, brother, get in here." So like, I guess more accurately be like, "Oh man, that's so sick. You can take the first shift." So I think it works either way. And I think it's one of those things we just don't have information for. And I don't think we ever will get information for. So I think that's really up to fan interpretation. As much as I would kill, and I would do so much if in one of these upcoming FNAF games, when we're going through like the ruins of Sister Location or going through like and finding out what was happening, all I want is just one portrait, one family portrait of the Aftons. That's all. One good family portrait of the Aftons that shows us canon good designs for William, the unnamed mother, Michael, Elizabeth, and Dave. What I would give for that. We've got portraits of Edwin's father now. Secret of the Mimic gave us a good portrait of Edwin Murray's father. We know what Edwin Murray's father looks like more accurately than William fucking Afton. So like, it's just all the best we have is that fucking Michael Afton looks like Rick Astley because he used the Rick Astley silhouette, but yeah, so I think it's up to fan interpretation because we don't have information on either way. All we know is that Michael survives the incident. That's all we know for certain, is that Michael survives what happens to him, likely because of remnant. If you want to believe that he fully heals because it's more believable he can get jobs afterwards, that's totally fine. If you want to believe that he's this shambling corpse that has to hide what he looks like to get a job, that's fine, because every place he works at canonically after this is a FNAF location. So it's not like Freddy's is vetting their employees. All this to say, I think Chloe's Imagination has the coolest Michael Afton design, and I'll stand by that. But thank you for your question, Chris. Our next one comes from Andrew, he, him. The Vengeful Spirit, sorry. I don't even think Andrew is the Vengeful Spirit. If in the FNAF movie, Mike has his dreams, and it's always about Garrett, his brother. But during his night shift, the missing children communicate to him through his dreams. Mike is trying to get Garrett back, and the ghosts want Abby. What if this were canon, in a way? During or after FNAF 1, Mike starts having dreams about David, the minigames, but the ghost children find a way to get into his mind, and that's why characters like Nightmare Own show up. Instead of it being a retcon, it could mean something more. This is really interesting. Something I never considered is the minigames of FNAF being Michael Afton's dreams. Which, I don't know why I hadn't considered that before, because in FNAF 2, we have those in-between night cutscenes of Freddy looking left and right in the FNAF 1 location. And then, I guess technically, I think it's the original Freddy's location. But we have the FNAF 1 gang of Freddy looking left and right, and then eventually seeing the puppet, eventually seeing Golden Freddy. And I had been thinking that is Jeremy Fitzgerald's dreams, because my logic was he's in the FNAF 2 location, he's near the MCI kids because of the Wizards, and he's putting on a Freddy mask. So the idea of Gabriel influencing Jeremy Fitzgerald's dreams, I think is very, very, it's an easy speculation to make, because, he's already near these ghosts. We know when ghosts mess with you, they mess with your dreams first, and he's putting on a Freddy mask next to Gabriel's body, essentially. So the idea of Gabriel reaching out being like, this is what I know, this is my vision, I think that's a super easy speculation to make. And I don't know why I never extended that to Michael Afton. I like the idea a lot that the death minigames are dreams Michael Afton is having. I don't know if I buy Nightmare Own being, like FNAF 4 Nightmare Own being something like that. I don't know if I buy that. I think the closest I'm willing to bear is that maybe Michael Afton was already having these nightmares, but going to the FNAF 1 location, that's when they turn into the FNAF 4 nightmares, because those kids are now haunting his dreams. I think that's fair. I think I agree with that. Because, this also goes on to what I was thinking for Nightmare Fredbear and Nightmare. The idea of if, the crying child or Dave is linked with Charlotte, if they're both in Golden Freddy, the idea of the crying child reaching out to Mike and then Nightmare Fredbear showing up. It's like, uh-oh, I didn't mean to do that. And then after that, because he's linked to Charlotte showing up, and Charlotte is Nightmare, this like agony creature, I think that tracks really well. We just don't have a lot of evidence for it. But I think I do, especially going after the FNAF 1 and FNAF 4 take place at the same time. The idea of the FNAF minigames being dreams Michael is having is a really interesting concept. And I do like that a lot. I think the only ones that don't make sense would be the Happiest Day minigames, because I think they very clearly take place after the FNAF 6 fire. I think that just makes the most sense. But it's still possible. But the idea of like the FNAF 2 minigames, the FNAF 4 itself, to an extent, even the FNAF 6 minigames, these being Michael's dreams, I think does make sense. And I do like that. We just don't have a lot of evidence to suggest that directly. But thank you for your question. Next one comes from Cecil. They, she, he. In Ultimate Custom Night, DeeDee can summon 6 secret characters into a player's run. Nightmare Chica, Shadow Bonnie, Plush Trap, Lolbit, Bonnet, and the Mini Renas. Why do you think DeeDee summons them specifically? Even if they don't have any main lore specific purpose, especially since Lolbit and Bonnet weren't originally canon when they first appeared in Sister Location Custom Night. Yeah, it's weird, right? Let me hear a question. I never really thought to directly look at the list DeeDee can summon and why. I think if Nightmare Chica and Shadow Bonnie weren't here, there'd be a really easy case to make of DeeDee summoning characters that don't really matter. Because Plush Trap, Lolbit, Bonnet, Mini Renas, who cares? But Nightmare Chica and Shadow Bonnie are summonable. So we gotta talk about that. I really can't believe Nightmare Chica is a DeeDee summon. I didn't know. Truth be told, Ultimate Custom Night is probably the game I've played the least, just because I don't find it very fun. I like natural progression and noble It's too much for me. It's the kind of game where I'm like, there's so many mechanics happening all at the same time, and there's no good way to learn them, and they're so discordant from each other that I just don't find it very fun. And that's just for me personally. So I had to double check that Nightmare Chica was summonable, because that's so crazy that Nightmare Chica is summonable by DeeDee, of all people, a character that seemingly is that important. Now, part of me also wants to say that these are characters that it's such a weird roster of characters. Because like you mentioned, Lolbit and Bonnet, not necessarily canon as far as we know. At least up until Ultimate Custom Night. They're both in FNAF World. DeeDee is an original from FNAF World. But Nightmare Chica, Shadow Bonnie, Plush Trap, and the Mini Renas, definitely real. Those are all definitely real characters. Like, the Mini Renas specifically are probably the most real. Because, like, Nightmare Chica, you could argue, like, she's a nightmare, so is she real? Shadow Bonnie is a whole conversation. Plush Trap, it's a whole conversation. The Mini Renas directly must be canon. But you're right to point it out. It's a very weird roster. And the easy answer is just say, oh, Scott added them at the last minute. But, like, I want to hesitate always to say, oh, it just is. Like, there might be a reason behind anything, and it's worth talking about. But the problem is, I keep looking at this roster, and I'm like, well, Nightmare Chica has that line of, oh no, that's Withered Chica. I was going to say, I was the first I've seen everything. I think that's Withered Chica. But, like, Nightmare Chica is a creation of the mind. Shadow Bonnie is a creation of agony. So it's like maybe they're like creations like that. But then we have Plush Trap and Mini Renas, which are just creations by William Afton. Like, man, I bring up this question not because I have a good answer for it, but hey, anybody listening, can you find any correlation for Nightmare Chica, Shadow Bonnie, Plush Trap, Lolbit, Bonnet, and the Mini Renas? Because truth be told, I cannot find a single goddamn connection with these characters. And I feel like there's got to be something, but I cannot find one. So Cecil, you're right to point this out, and I thank you for bringing it up, and I have no idea. But thank you for your question. Our next one comes from Apex, he, him. If we know that the souls of the kids are attached to the endoskeletons inside the suits, since that's why William takes them and melts them down to put them in the fun times, then what is the spirit inside of Golden Freddy possessing? Since Golden Freddy can't have an endoskeleton inside him, since we'd be moving around like the others do. And if he does have an endoskeleton inside of him, why doesn't he move? Thank you for your question, Apex. So my thinking is that he does, because he's a springlock suit. Like we talked about earlier, the springlock suits, it's attached. I think what's happening is that it's open, essentially. It's in that ready to be worn mode. So that's why Golden Freddy isn't moving as much. That being said, there's material to possess because that's in there. But I think that's also a good reason why Golden Freddy's endoskeleton doesn't necessarily get added with the rest of them in the fun times. Instead, it gets added to William Afton directly when he repairs Spring Bonnie. Because since it's a springlock suit, he can't just take the endoskeleton out. It is affixed to the exoskeleton. So I think that makes the most sense there. And then, going off of the Stormister theory that in between FNAF 3 and FNAF 6, William Afton takes pieces of Fredbear to repair himself. That's when the vengeful spirit attaches itself to William Afton. That's my thinking anyway. I think that makes the most sense. But my logic for Golden Freddy is it's in the ready to be worn mode, which is why it looks like an empty suit, but it still has the endoskeleton affixed to it. Not a great answer, but that's my thinking. Thank you for your question, Apex. Because the main problem with that is it seems like the natural state it wants to be is endoskeleton is in. But it could also be that we just don't know how springlock suits work. Just because an endoskeleton is active doesn't mean it needs to be standing. We know very little about how springlock suits function. So I think the idea that even if the endoskeleton is in, it could be slumped over like that is possible. And as far as why doesn't he move around? There's a lot of weird stuff Golden Freddy does. I think that's him not moving around is like the least weird thing. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Our last question comes from Kenny. They. At the very end of the bedtime story at the very end of the bedtime story ending in Secret of the Mimic, you hear a clunk, metal sounding. If the shadow we see at the start of the game is Edwin, could that be Edwin coming into the room, breaking the door or in the vent? And is that where a DLC would start? So I had to go back and listen. It's very subtle, but there is like a kind of sound right as the screen is fading. I thought I didn't even notice it, frankly. And at first I thought nothing of it, but thinking about it, there's two possibilities. One, it's an accident. Because I think the idea of like a random sound being missed somewhere along the way is possible, but I always want to hesitate to assume something is either a mistake or a coincidence. If it is meaningful. The idea that it's Edwin does track. I think there's a couple possibilities. I think one could be any bit of machinery that's like resetting. It could be the storybook resetting for all we know. The idea, but you bring up a good point. If Edwin had survived, I think the idea that he was going to, like, he's been keeping an eye on us and he noticed that we did the parachute. And then, he noticed that Fiona is seemingly all focused on the pizzeria and maybe shuts down. He's, hearing a whole bunch of stuff going on at the manor. The idea of like, hey, what's going on at the manor? And then going in to check on it and then not seeing M2 and not seeing us and then running up and like hearing the storybook, trying to get in there. I think that's a really possible, that's really possible. Not to mention if there's any sort of remote access to M2's status or our data diver's status, knowing that the Mimic schematics had been uploaded to M2 and like everything's been fixed, Edwin probably would run over. I hesitate to say that's where the DLC would start, because I don't think that ending is canon. I don't think it makes a lot of sense for the storybook ending to be canon. It's like the only ending that requires a second playthrough and requires like a tiger we had no way to possess before. Like, there's no way for us to possess this tiger without it. So like, I don't think it's canon. But if it is, that probably would be where the DLC starts. But yeah, I think you're right to call that out. It's a weird noise. It's worth talking about. My thinking is it's either some kind of machinery, or if it's Edwin, that does make sense, but I don't think that's where DLC would start. That's my thoughts on that. But again, thank you for your question. And if you want your questions answered on the podcast, feel free to send them to Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. It's in the description to copy and paste because it's a pain to type out. Until next time, as always, you've been watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. We hope to enjoy our future patronage. Bye-bye for now.